Welcome to tonight's event. Thanks for being here. This event is called Unlocking Incentives for Multifamily Upgrades, and we're really happy you're here. I'm Ellen Honigstock. I'm the Senior Director of Education here at Urban Green Council, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Urban Green's values are excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and engagement. We invite you to be mindful of these during the program. Before we start, we'd like to thank Con Ed for sponsoring this evening's event and for their continued support. So we are really excited about this event because New York City is at an inflection point. 2024, this year, is the first compliance year for Local Law 97, which is New York City's carbon emissions cap for large buildings. Multifamily buildings are the most common building type covered under Local Law 97, and multifamily buildings are also the least likely to have previous experience with energy upgrades. So we've been working closely with Con Edison and the New York City Accelerator for months to prepare this program. We hope it will provide clear and useful information about financial incentives that can reduce the cost for these important energy retrofit projects. We're also thrilled to partner with 32BJ again to help get this important information to the right people. So this evening, here's what's going to happen. We'll start with a welcome from Michaela from 32BJ. Then I'll come back on to start us off with a short primer about incentives. Then we'll have Gladys Cora from the New York City Accelerator to explain what the Accelerator is and how they can help you jumpstart your energy retrofit project. Once that stage is set, Derek Kowalczyk from Wildan, who manages the day-to-day operations of Con Ed's multifamily incentive program, will give you an overview of Con Ed's multifamily incentives, including all the stuff you'll need to know to apply. After all that, we expect to have close to a half hour for questions. So please submit your questions through the Q&A box and upvote other people's questions and ask questions at any time because it helps us to see, what folks want to know. So now I'm happy to turn it over to Michaela.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Unlocking Incentives Multifamily Upgrades. It is an exciting time for us where we now have more tools, more expertise, more support from the state and the city to make changes in our building. And with that is more funding opportunities. And I say exciting because for those of us who have been in the building industry for at least 10 years, we have witnessed so much change from building technology to materials, design, operations, and the increase of green laws in New York City, as Ellen just mentioned earlier. Our building operators, our property managers, building owners, boards, now more than ever, are trying to do projects in their buildings and are also trying to keep up with the many green local laws. So all of us on the panel, thanks to Urban Green, brought us together with Con Edison, New York Accelerator, and 32BJ to really help our community unlock the what and the how of utility incentives. So if you are planning to make upgrades in your building, or you are in the process of doing so as one of your New Year's resolutions, or to show your building some love for Valentine's Day next week, definitely please use this time to ask questions. Use the Q&A box to enter a question or vote on a question. There will be a lot of information, so do not worry. This event is being recorded, and together with the slides, it will be shared with everybody afterward. And so, with that, welcome again, and we hope that you find what we have to share with you tonight both helpful and encouraging to make those upgrades.
Thanks, Michaela, and thanks for connecting incentives with Valentine's Day. That is awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a very short primer about utility energy efficiency incentives, just to provide some context. New York State has ambitious targets for carbon reduction. New York has a statewide strategy to reduce energy use and carbon emissions from New York's buildings. It's called New Efficiency New York. There's a link to it and all the other resources we mentioned on our event webpage. These energy efficiency targets are 185 tera-BTUs in site energy savings. Site energy means the end use energy at the building. And it's the equivalent of saving the energy used to fuel 1.8 million homes, that's a lot of energy. And the related target reduction in carbon emissions is 22 million metric tons, which would account for about 30% of the emissions reductions that the state needs to stay on target to meet their 40% reduction by 2030 goal. And these energy efficiency targets are the most aggressive in the history of New York, and New York's are some of the most aggressive in the nation. So a main focus is increasing end use efficiency in buildings. So the new efficiency New York deals with things besides buildings, but Urban Green really we're just buildings all the time. And they had this chart I wanted to show you. And in terms of achievable savings potential, the multifamily sector is second only to single family homes in, possible energy efficiency savings. So that's why we're really having this narrow focus on multifamily for this event. So you might be wondering why utilities are incentivizing their customers to use less of their product. Well, there's three reasons. One is regulatory compliance. Basically, the state says they have to, right? Number two is related to grid stability and economic efficiency. Energy efficiency reduces the overall demand on the power grid, especially during peak usage times. This helps prevent overloading the system, reduces the need for building new power plants, and lowers maintenance costs on the existing infrastructure. Basically, it's a lot less expensive to pay for energy efficiency than to build new power plants. And the third reason is environmental responsibility. Energy efficiency reduces energy consumption, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants associated with the generation of electricity, especially when those power plants are fueled by fossil fuels. So there's a lot of types of incentives for energy efficiency, which is one of the reasons we wanted to focus this one, because it can really, the topic can get very broad. So what we're not talking about today, we're not talking about state and local tax rebates or discounts or credits for any, specific technologies. We're not talking about solar. There's so much stuff out there about solar. We're not talking about that today. And we're also not talking about low interest loans and other financing options. However, we have done some really great events with the Accelerator about how to finance energy upgrades, and we'll make sure that those links are up on the event webpage as well. So what we are talking about are utility energy efficiency incentive programs. These incentives are funded by ratepayers via a small surcharge on utility bills. And those little small payments add up to a huge pot of money that's then used to provide incentives to facilitate individual energy efficiency projects at specific buildings. Essentially, you pay into these programs and they're there for you to use. So today we're specifically focusing on the incentives related to multifamily buildings. So now I'm going to hand it over to Gladys Cora from the Accelerator, who will convince you that they should be your first call. And while Gladys is coming on, I want to remind you that we'll have time for questions and put them in the Q&A box and upvote other people's questions. Thanks, Gladys.
Thank you, Ellen. Hi, everyone. I'm Gladys from New York City Accelerator, and today I will be going through an overview of our program, describe what is New York City Accelerator, how can we help you, and what's the process of working with us. But before that, I'll go a little bit into Local 97 and an overview of New York City's pathway to decarbonization. But before going to Local 97, it's important to understand why this law is important for New York City's future. In nearly 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings, and in 2050, 90% of these buildings will still be here. In an effort to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, the city has passed a series of decarbonization policies, including Climate Mobilization Act of 2019, which contains Local 97 as the central piece of the law to ensure that the city meets its goals. In addition to that, New York City has also established programs like New York City Accelerator that provides free assistance to help transition the city to carbon neutrality while also promoting economic growth. And now, with that framing in mind, I'll give an overview of Local 97. At a high level, this law aims to decrease carbon emissions in New York City at least 40% by 2030, and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. It's made out of two main sections, which is Article 320 and Article 321, and that sets emissions for Article 324, most of the covered buildings are market rate buildings, and their first carbon emission limits will be applied in 2024 until 2029. Then second carbon emissions limit start being applied in 2030 to 2034, and lower limits will follow in 2035 and so on. The bar chart on the right, it represents like a visual representation of what is just discussed, and you can see that over time these limits start decreasing to reach that climate goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. Article 321, on the other hand, it's focused on affordable buildings, where it provides the compliance pathways for these type of buildings that could either meet emission limits, 2030 emission limits, or they can choose to implement the 13 prescriptive energy conservation measures. As far as just to note, based on 2022 benchmarking data, it shows that only 11% of the buildings are projected to be out of compliance in the first cycle, which is like 2024, 2029. And also, New York City Department of Buildings released some new rules end of last year related to implementing more like a guidance to implement Local 97. Most of these rules, or the key highlights of the rules, include they outline penalty mitigation pathways that could be related to unforeseen situations. They also outline the good faith effort pathway. They provide a new credit related to building electrification. If you complete early electrification work before 2030, you get a credit that you can apply towards your emission reduction targets up until 2036. If you install the system before 2027, you get a more favorable credit. It also describes reporting requirements and penalties that are related to affordable housing and houses of worship under the Article 321. Now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into and explain like what New York City Accelerator is and our offerings. So we're a city-backed program that helps building stakeholders to meet compliance requirements for local laws, boost building performance, reduce carbon emission across New York City buildings. And we do this by providing free technical guidance. We help identify building upgrade projects, connect building decision makers directly with service providers to implement these projects, and help building identify applicable incentives or financing options. We also offer a lot of tools on our website, which provide, like our learning center offers no-cost building operator trainings. And I'll dive a little bit later, a little bit deeper into what other tools might be beneficial for you to use, that you can find them on our website. We work with any building that is a privately owned building in New York City, 5,000 square feet and above. That could be new construction or existing buildings. Smaller buildings, we refer them to our partner organization, which specialize in this market segment. There's no cost, no catch, no sign up or commitment. We're here to help you. The first step to work with us, you just give us a call or email us, or you can submit the contact form on our website, whichever works best for you. Once you reach out to us, you'll be in touch with a program coordinator. They'll ask a few questions about the building, and then they'll connect you with a dedicated account manager, which will be your main point of contact throughout your participation in this program. And we'll help you with any questions you might have. We are made of a group of very passionate and skilled professionals, and we're specialized in different areas like affordable housing. We have solar specialists that can provide a free solar feasibility analysis if the building is a good candidate. We have financing specialists. We have new building team, carbon challenge program for buildings that want to go above and beyond. So we're here to help you, and with all the different types of buildings you might be working at. Once you're in touch and with our account manager, they'll review the data that they have for your building. They're doing building research, but it's important to also work with you and understand the building needs, but also what work has already been completed and what work you're planning to doing in the future. and they will discuss with you their findings and determine the appropriate next steps. We'll work with you to understand the different local laws that the building might need to comply with, number of like rent regulated units, it's like affordable housing, describe any compliance deadlines, will prioritize the buildings based on different local laws. We'll work with you to identify what energy conservation measures make sense and are would be applicable based on your building needs, and identify, prioritize and sequence these projects based on energy savings or carbon reduction impacts. The next slide, this is just provides an idea as to what would a building need to implement different types of measure based on their desire to reduce a specific percentage of to achieve a specific greenhouse gas reduction percentage, and based on how they're performing towards 2030 limits. Obviously, as this is just an example, and we work with buildings, and all our assistance would be specific to that building. But just to give an overview of different measures that we'd be working on based on how the building performs. After we've discussed the different projects and energy conservation measures that you're interested in pursuing, the account manager will help you identify the different incentives and any financing options that would be able, based on the type of projects, but also the type of building. We also can help you find service providers to implement these projects, and the account manager at this point will help you along the whole way until you're ready to follow either the incentive pathway, or you want additional help with like financing that goes beyond incentives. In this slide, it's as part of our technical assistance, as I mentioned, we help buildings connect to available incentives from state and utilities. This is not an exhaustive list, just a few examples of programs that are available specifically for multifamily. Derek later will dive deep into the multifamily incentives, but just to show that we will provide help streamline the process to connect the different measures with the different incentive programs that would be applicable to it, and just facilitate that process, check eligibility, and connect you with their representatives on their end to move forward with the incentive applications. We also have financing specialists in our team. They would provide help with identifying applicable financing programs that would be relevant to the specific project needs and fit the building use and financial structure. They would help you connect to capital providers and lenders and engage with you throughout the whole process. The part of the Climate Mobilization Act was Local 96, which was enacted as part of it and enabled PACE in New York City. If you're not familiar with it, it's a voluntary financing mechanism that enables you to secure funding for your building energy and water efficiency projects and repay them through a charge on your property's tax bill. It's intended to provide you with a flexible financing option for a variety of projects. Some of the key benefits of it is that it provides 100% financing fixed rate. It's long-term, so you can pay in lower payments, enables lower payments. It can be used to implement a variety of projects that can help you reduce operating costs and achieve compliance through various energy laws. And it's another great feature is that it can be transferred upon sale of the building. And if you're interested in our financing specialist provide help with and support to identify the right option for your building, rather that be PACE or another financing option. We are here to help you through every step of the process. We're happy to work with you to help you navigate all the different project stages. So we'll be able to follow you from the start, implementation, pre-development, all the way to project completion. Now I'll go through a few tools and resources that you can find on our website. The first one is the building energy snapshot tool. The first thing you'll see once you go on our website, you start entering your address there, and once you click on search now, it will show you how is your building doing in terms of local 97. It's just like an estimated fee. It'll show the year that we're using the data to calculate it, and you can also download the results and have it as a PDF, which is you can easily share with any other building stakeholders. We also, as I initially said, our account managers will provide help with helping you choose service providers to implement any of your projects. We have on our website. You can also go on our website and we have the tool where you can search based on the company or the services, based on what projects you want to implement, incentive program affiliation, market sector, and certifications. It's a good place to also look for any service providers will help you with the implementation of Local 97 projects. And yeah, feel free to contact us. As I said, we're here to help. You can reach to us through our web form or email or or just give us a call. Thank you.
Thanks, Gladys. That was awesome. We appreciate all that information. So now I'd like to invite Derek Kowalczyk from Wildan to explain multifamily energy efficiency incentives from Con Ed.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ellen. So I will be jumping in to actually talk about, how Con Edison can help you, get your buildings to a more efficient state and the exact types of incentives that are offered. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to these incentives. So, how do we connect the dots from everything that was mentioned already? So Ellen went through and talked about how, or rather why utilities have these programs, why other types of agencies will have incentive programs, and ultimately why they exist, right? And then Gladys is mentioning how the New York City Accelerator can kind of connect the dots and start the process, because it can be confusing sometimes. So hopefully between that offer to help and then also this explanation, you'll have an actionable next step to move forward with. In terms of what I'm going to be covering, so there are multiple different programs that Con Edison provides, and then I'm going to walk through the different types of incentives specifically, so what types of measures you can expect to be incentivized. There's not too much on the actual nitty-gritty of the numbers, but we will be sharing a link to the 2024 incentive fact sheet. We just thought sharing too much of the numbers right now would be hard to work through. So, and then after that, there's a case study. And finally, we'll go through with, what exactly do we have to do in the application process? Great. So jumping into the overview, before we even talk about the specific projects, I kind of want to talk about the impact that it's had. So just last year, this is all numbers from last year, Con Edison was able to provide incentives for over 2,800 multifamily projects, and that's in New York City and Westchester County. So as you can see, that's over 100 million cash incentives all paid out last year. And then in terms of savings, how much did all these programs save together? So on the electric side, there was 25,000 megawatt hours saved. And then between converting those megawatt hours to MMBTU, adding natural gas savings, and the savings that happened from electrification projects, that was over 862,000 MMBTU. So you can see the conversions on the slide of what that actually turns into. And so these incentives do really end up helping both the entire service territory, but individual multifamily properties save a lot of energy. So in a second, I will be going through the specific program types. But all of them, what do they have in common? So I saw some questions about, are smaller buildings available, or like, can smaller buildings get these incentives? And yes, anything with 5 or more residential units will qualify as a multifamily building under these incentive programs. You do have to have an active electric account or gas service account for the common areas to apply for these programs. You have to be in the New York City / Westchester Con Ed service territory. And then finally, one big thing that ties all the programs together is that Willdan Energy Solutions is the implementation contractor. So when you are working day to day on these programs, you'll likely be interfacing from someone from Willdan, but we have a really good and close relationship, and we're on the phone every day with Con Edison to make sure that we're providing a great service for both them and for all the customers. So let's get into it. So we're primarily going to talk about these 4 programs, and you can see there's the New York State Clean Heat Program in the Con Ed service territory. Then there's the Con Edison Multifamily Energy Efficiency Program, also shortened to MFEEP. Then there's the New York State Affordable Multifamily Energy Efficiency Program called AMEEP. And then lastly, inside of both MFEEP and AMEEP, there are adder programs. And adder programs, and I'll dig in just a second, but this is on top of the incentives that you can get from saving energy over the long run. So the idea of energy efficiency is you're saving over a year, etc. For the targeted demand management and the non-pipe alternatives, this is for reducing your demand and essentially reducing either your kilowatts or reducing your peak decatherm use. So these incentives come on top of the energy efficiency incentives if you can help reduce the demand in your building. So going on to each of the programs separately, the New York State Clean Heat Program, this is focused on electrification projects. And I know electrification is thrown around as a buzzword nowadays in the industry, but generally think heat pumps and measures that help heat pumps perform better. So building envelope upgrades, such as replacing of windows, air sealing, the wall and roof insulation, so that once you do move over to energy efficient heat pumps, that you're actually keeping the energy and keeping all the temperature differentials inside of your building. So clean heat program is if you want to move your building from fossil fuel systems like oil or natural gas and move them to clean electric heat through heat pumps. The MFEEP program, this is the longest and biggest of the programs for Con Edison. This is generally the market rate buildings within Con Ed service territories will qualify for a number of electric and gas upgrades, and we'll go through the exact measures that qualify for it. But if you've got an electric account with Con Edison, if you've got a gas account with Con Edison, and you're above 5 units, then you can qualify for the MFEEP program. AMEEP is very similar to MFEEP, except here there is one additional layer, and that's affordable housing. And so there's a number of ways to qualify to be considered affordable housing, but essentially there's 2 benefits of moving forward on this program pathway. So there's the sometimes measures will have different incentive rates under AMEEP than MFEEP. Generally, most of them are pretty similar, but sometimes you can get a better rate. Then there's also something called the comprehensive pathway within AMEEP. And what that means, instead of incentivizing separate measures over time in your building, you can sign up for a more comprehensive incentive package, and it's based on points. So you would sign up for multiple measures, and those measures will have points associated with them, and then those points you can either qualify for a tier 1 or a tier 2 type of project based on how many points you get, which is tied to how many measures you install. And then the savings that are brought in are actually based off of the dwelling unit. So the incentives, when they become calculated, you would just times the amount of units you have in your building, times that number if you're either tier 1 or 2. And then lastly, the adder programs. And so there are the two major types of adder programs, the ones that reduce electric demand in buildings. And this is predominantly in Brooklyn and Queens. Right now, there's two neighborhoods that are open, as they're called. This is also called the neighborhood program. And essentially, in BQDM, as one territory, and then Jamaica as a second territory, if you can prove that you're reducing demand by installing certain types of upgrades that also qualify for MFEEP and AMEEP, you can get an additional amount of incentives on top of the first round of incentives. And then for non-pipe alternatives, this is in limited regions that need to reduce the demand from use of natural gas. And right now there's a region open in the Soundview neighborhood of the Bronx. Great. So I talked a little bit about each of the programs, and hopefully because you're here at this presentation, you're interested in unlocking some of these potential incentives, but not every, there's a lot of different reasons to move forward with installing these measures. So if the fact that Con Edison can help you with these, with actually getting part of the costs for the project covered, there's a lot of other reasons for actually moving forward with energy efficiency upgrades anyway. So you could be avoiding fines, you could be lowering your operating expenses, and now with Local Law 97, a lot of folks are really paying attention to their carbon footprint. You might also want to improve building health. We've all heard about the different ways that better and newer HVAC systems can help with building health. I know that's been a big topic ever since the COVID pandemic, but also you can help meet just your general sustainability goals. So now I'm going to jump in a little bit into some more of the specifics of the 2024 incentives. Great. So on the electric side, we have a number of upgrades that qualify for these incentives. So some of the most common ones for a very long time has been, the low-hanging fruit. So LED lighting and lighting controls. In addition to that, there are, projects related to elevator modernization, as well as a number of projects that are related to your building's HVAC system. So installing a number of motors or drives, so either VFDs and EC motors. You can do a whole chiller replacement alongside cooling tower replacement. You can do PTACs for air conditioners, and then you can do central unit replacement as well. So all of these will qualify for some amount of incentive. On the gas side, we have different things such as pipe insulation. So you might want to look down into your boiler room and see if your pipes are insulated. Maybe your boiler is starting to be that age that it needs to be replaced. Also boiler clean and tune. So just general O&M sometimes can qualify for incentives. Energy management systems, there's a lot of different opportunities to better understand your energy use and get incentives for having that better understanding. Two pipe steam retro commissioning. And then right now, what's really big in both the industry, but also in our programs is building envelope. So making sure that you have an airtight building envelope as well as a well-insulated one. So right now, there's a lot of focus on roof insulation. We want to drive up the amount of projects for wall insulation. Folks are replacing their windows for better and tighter windows, as well as just generally doing air sealing throughout your entire building. Lastly, generally, electrification is a bit scary right now and a big undertaking, but it is the way forward for everyone's sustainability goals. And so Con Edison is very focused on how to help property managers, property owners move forward with these installations. So air source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are the main types of heat pumps that are incentivized. There are some options, but they are more challenging for ground source. But generally, the work that we do with Con Edison is around air source heat pumps and the heat pump water heaters. So in addition to that, while these are being installed, there is bonus incentives if you can also do building envelope upgrades at the exact same time. So roof and wall insulation, window replacements, and for existing buildings, the air sealing. And then lastly, for folks that might have had questions about what exactly will help drive down the demand in terms of the adder program. So right now, the bigger of the two, so the non-wire solutions, also previously called targeted demand management, and also neighborhoods program, is that bonus incentive I was talking about. And one of the easiest ways to do this is actually to install LEDs as part of those service territories that qualify. But there are more complex measures that do qualify, and those would be the package terminal air conditioners, so PTACs, elevator modernization, chiller replacement, and cooling tower replacement. So all of these measures are known to help reduce demand in your building and therefore will qualify for an added incentive on top of your normal incentives you would get anyway for doing this work. Awesome. So I've talked a lot about the different measures that can qualify. I talked about the different programs. One additional layer that's important to know as you move forward with these incentives is, when working with the program team, there's going to be a few different ways to actually move through the process. So the process looks a little bit different depending on which of these 4 quadrants you're in. For the majority of customers, for the majority of folks that are working in our programs, you're going to be working through the prescriptive measure pathway. So this is for electric and gas equipment, and this type of measures will have their energy calculations are well known. They've been industry standards, and we're pulling it from the New York State Technical Resource Manual, and therefore we have tools and different ways to be able to calculate the savings and incentives very easily. And so this is usually the fastest way, but this is also on measures that have been the most popular for a while. You might not fit into that category. Maybe there's some project that you want to take on that's a little bit more complex, that has a little bit more needed information to prove that it is saving energy, and that would go under the custom measures category. So generally, the contractor or the consultant that you're working with will have to provide additional information, specific versions of the measure spec sheets. Maybe we'll have to have the custom calculations. There might have to be some engineering desk reviews. In terms of the Clean Heat program, Clean Heat has both prescriptive and custom pathways within it. And so when talking to us, you can walk through to double check if your specific installation would qualify under prescriptive or custom. Again, the biggest difference is just the process and maybe how long it would take to verify the energy savings. The last bucket I do want to talk about is actually, oftentimes it is a little bit scary to try to dive in and understand what kind of incentives you would qualify for, but in-unit direct install is available for all multifamily properties, and essentially you can have your tenants' apartments have their LEDs replaced, and then where applicable, install low flow aerators for both bathroom and kitchen faucets, and then replace their shower heads. So the aerators and the shower heads will ultimately save your tenants money on the gas side, and oftentimes building owners as well. And then LEDs will help save energy on the electric side. Awesome. That's a lot of information, but we also want to give at least, show a little bit more of what the incentives would actually look like. So this is just one case study, and each year Con Edison works to create a few of these case studies. So if you're interested, after I go through this one, you might want to look online, and on the main homepage for the multifamily energy efficiency program, there's about 4 or 5 other case studies that you can walk through. And if you're interested in boilers, there's a case study on boilers, etc. But this one, we wanted to touch on roof insulation, and you can see that the building in question was a 22,000 square foot and almost about 150 units. So you can see 147 units here, multifamily building in the Bronx. They undertook this installation for roof insulation, and then ultimately they ended up saving almost 14,000 therms annually, which equates to this 73.8 tons of CO2. Now, most of you might be, interested in that number, but I know a lot of you are probably interested in the cost. And so the overall cost of the project would have been $294,000, but you can see that after the incentive was applied, the customer only had to pay less than $50,000. So you can see how much these incentives can actually help cover for these efficiency improvements. So the payback was 2.2, and that in of itself is great to see. Before we move on from this slide, I also wanted to call out, where exactly you can imagine saving energy in your building. So this is a graphic that I love to use, but essentially, you've got your lighting on the electric side, you've got your heating and cooling on both electric and gas, installation of the building envelope and insulation, and the insulation being on their building shell, but also for the piping within the building. And then obviously great to have an energy management system also covered under the incentive programs, and you can easily see how much energy you're using over time. Awesome. So how does the process actually work, right? I talked a little bit about what measures actually qualify, but how do we even get started? So this is the general process overall for the entire program. So one of the first things that we would need to do, WES here stands for Willdan Energy Solutions, does account and equipment eligibility check, right? When you're trying to figure out if your building will actually qualify, you reach out to us and we figure out if the account by, from Con Edison, electric or gas, will actually count. There's certain situations where there's ineligibility. Let's say there's a big balance left on the account, but generally, most of the time, as long as it's an energy using account and it's for the common areas, it's going to work out for these incentive programs. Then you can see in step 2, we have an acronym PC. This is participating contractor. So generally, these programs are contractor led. This is by design for, we want to make sure that it's a little bit easier for customers to actually apply into these programs. And so we don't want customers to have to do the paperwork. And generally, the contractor is the one that works with Willdan and Con Edison throughout the process. You are allowed to go in as a customer-led project, but for the most part, when reaching out to either ourselves or the accelerator, eventually you're going to bump into working with the contractor that's actually going to do the installation. So before the installation is allowed to happen, we do need to do a pre-inspection. And so all projects will have to have a pre-inspection, and some projects will have to do an engineering desk review. Again, between that prescriptive and that custom, really boils down to the complexity of the measure. But the pre-inspection is just to double check that, you know, the thing you're asking for money for isn't there to start with, right? So if you want to qualify for installing an EMS system, we just have to go on site and double check, do you have already an EMS system at your property? After that's completed, then the customer would sign the commitment letter that they want to move forward with the project. And then our team would essentially allow the contractor to start the installation process. Once the installation is complete, we would do another verification inspection and potentially a final engineering review. Again, just to double check that the thing that was supposed to be installed was in fact installed, and that we can issue the final incentive for that installation. One big important note, hence in red here, is that before you and your accompanying contractor are able to do the installations, the pre-inspection does have to happen. Unfortunately, we can't incentivize things that were, let's say, installed 6 months ago or a year ago. It has to be something new that's about to be installed. But luckily, there's a lot of different measures. So you might have seen, you know, on the measure list that I had previously mentioned, things that you're already planning to do or things that you've done. But maybe there's things that you're willing to jump into, especially knowing that there's a lot of cost coverage available from Con Edison. So again, as long as it hasn't been installed yet, you can be thinking about installing it, but it just can't be yet installed. Awesome. And then lastly, just providing some information. So if you have, ever have any questions, you can reach out to the first email there. So coned multifamily@willdan.com. There's a general inbox, will get you to the right person. Also providing my email here. Generally, it's probably better to go through the general inbox because in addition to myself, we've got a staff of 30 plus subject matter experts to help you move through the process. But of course, if a lot of this seems very daunting, then feel free to also reach out to the Accelerator. Again, Gladys went through, there's a lot of different resources, and ultimately they'll probably refer back after you have a good understanding and a scope over to our team to start moving you through the incentive program.
Thank you, Derek. That was fantastic. So Gladys, if you'll come back, we are going to start the Q&A portion of this event. So thank you for those of you who have put questions in. Thank you very much. I'm going to start with some of those, and we have some questions that folks asked as part of the registration process. So let's see. This is a question from Irfan Hadjovic, and the question is, and I actually had a similar question. Will the New York Accelerator work with resident managers, or does it have to be someone with authority? I know we have a lot of co-op board members on this, in attendance. So like, who makes the call? Does it have to be a board member, a board officer? Can it be staff? Like, how does that work? So Gladys, you answer first.
Yeah, no, we work with every building stakeholder. It could be a board member, it could be a resident manager, property manager, building owner. We also work with service providers. We have our own service provider program. So if you want to be part of it, we work also with them. So you can reach out to us regardless.
Okay. And a question similar, I want to talk some more about process. So Shernette Henry asked if a building needs to wait to complete the energy audit first before pursuing any of these incentives. She said, for example, the roof replacement incentive, we already know that when they need to replace the roof. And Rebecca thank you for answering some of this stuff, but I wanted to get into this a little deeper.
Yeah, I can jump in, and yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So anyone seeing Rebecca's name, Rebecca is actually a superstar on my team. She is a outreach coordinator, and oftentimes actually she'll probably be the first voice you hear when reaching out about questions. But yeah, Rebecca got it right. You don't necessarily need an energy audit to go through the incentive programs, except for the Amy Comprehensive. If you're going just measure by measure, as long as you understand what you need from your scope, then you can move forward with those incentives. But again, similar to what Rebecca had mentioned, if you know you want to save energy, but you don't know exactly where to start, an energy audit is a great option. And also, connecting to all of the resources we're mentioning here, going to the Accelerator to start that process is always good.
Thank you. Similarly, somebody asked if property owners can perform work using in-house staff.
Yeah, so we do usually have folks connect with participating contractors. There are situations that we can do the in-house staff, so that would be a customer-led project, and we would just have to provide the guidance, because generally the participating contractors that we do work with will work with us for a very long time. So I, generally recommend that, but there are situations where it can be customer-led and you can use in-house staff.
There was a similar question that someone asked about, can you use your own contractor, that I saw Rebecca answered. Oh, here it is. Are you allowed to use your own contractor if they register with Con Ed, or does it all go through Wilden? And thank you, Rebecca, for that answer. But can you talk about, like, how does that work? Or what comes first? I mean, would you wait for like an engineering review from Wilden, and then, at what point, like, how does the contractor get selected?
Yeah, so the contractor is selected by the customer. There are, we call them participating contractors because they are already participating in our program. To become a participating contractor, there are a few ways. So you have to get onboarded. But like Rebecca said, we can onboard any contractor that you want to become a participating contractor. Generally, we just have to have a certificate of insurance. We have to get the right documentation, like a W-9. And then we also then go through just like a quick vetting process to make sure that they can work with our program. But generally, most of the time, you can bring your own contractor to the table.
Okay. So Greg Kalafatic, sorry, I'm butchering that name. Are there upfront out-of-pocket expenses for electric upgrades and incentives, or are they financed over time as incentives kick in? So I'm assuming that's about a specific technology, because I have a similar question for Gladys about, audits and upfront analysis. But for technology, is it paid for first, and then you said like there's a 2-year, return on investment, so it just gets paid for out of savings? Or like, how does that work in terms of out-of-pocket costs? Or are there different ways it works?
Yeah, so the incentives, when they come in, will get paid out once the project is complete. So I know that sometimes for the customers may have issues fronting the amount of money. And there are financing options for that. But generally, you can imagine, let's say you're going to get a $20,000 incentive, that will come in later. Oftentimes, participating contractors will be the ones that actually do the installation, and no money out of pocket for the customers, and then use the incentives to get paid for after the job is complete. So that's another reason why going with a participating contractor is useful, because they're kind of used to that flow. And so they can work with you. There might be some fees involved, but essentially a lot of what they're expecting to get paid for is through the incentives.
Okay. A sort of similar question to Gladys is, when folks call you, what information do they already have, or do they need, or should they wait to do before calling you, or should they just call you and then you'll tell them what they should go do to prepare?
Yeah, we do offer some guidance on that, but usually once someone reaches out to us, the program coordinator will ask a few questions like what type of building it is, if it's commercial, multifamily, house of worship, or it's the role, the person that's contacting, what is their role, and also a general idea as to what they're interested or what they're hoping that we could provide help with, just to start the conversation. After that, they will assign the building to an account manager, and the account manager will provide some additional guidance. They would send like a link maybe to a form where the questions to that form are mostly related to building systems, just to understand a little bit the building better. And after that, you'll schedule a call, and you'll schedule a 1 hour call virtual meeting where you discuss the building and go through the whole process that I explained today.
And so do you want to have one point of contact, or do you want to have somebody from like the board or staff or property management attending that call, or do you don't care?
It could be several people. It could be several people joining the call. It could be a board member, several board members. It could be the building owner along with the resident manager. Sometimes it's like the facilities manager because they might have a better idea as to what they implemented. So several building stakeholders are always helpful to provide that different information we need to understand the building better and just continue the conversation and identify any measures they might want to start implementing.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to talk about electrification for a moment. So Derek, there's some questions about partial electrification. Like if the entire building can't electrify, are there incentives to do, some apartments, or how does that work?
Yeah, so most projects under the offerings for multifamily will have to be full load. So the entire building has to electrify at once. There is one category right now, and we're trying to redesign it because we understand it's a little bit restrictive, but that's category 10. So that's partial load electrification. And what that means is that there's a certain percentage threshold or MMBTU savings threshold that you can qualify. And then if you meet those numbers, then you can do part of your building. I'm assuming that, well, maybe I'll take a step back, sorry. So for that category, you do need more than 100 units for your building to be able to qualify for the partial load electrification. For buildings under that amount, there aren't too many options for multifamily. And if someone else from Con Edison is on the line, feel free to help answer the question. But essentially, I believe the residential program, you can do individual units within a building to electrify. But in terms of multifamily, right now, most of the offerings are for full building electrification.
Okay. I have another process question. So on the case study that you showed, actually, I'm not sure. Actually, now I don't remember what was in that case study, but you mentioned a project that has envelope measures and HVAC measures, right? So are those done together? Is there one sort of engineering review and then you pick two contractors, or are there contractors that do all of the services, and who project manages all that stuff and coordinates with the building staff?
Yeah, generally, a lot of times it will be through the participating contractors. So, you might want to pick someone who can do multiple measures. The way that it is in our system is that it's generally one or a few measures at a time. If you want to go through a situation where you do a lot at once, you would want to go through our comprehensive pathway available for affordable housing. The one caveat is when it comes to clean heat, so the electrification, you could be under the one project, you'd be doing heat pumps, and then you would also be doing the building envelope. And for clean heat, the building envelope measure, as we call it, is kind of multiple measures at once. So you'd be likely doing windows, wall insulation, and roof insulation all kind of together.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
I think so. So what would be, let's say for a building with 100 units, just to pick a number, how long would the process take? Actually, let's start with Gladys. How long does the process take when someone calls you till they start, till work starts happening? What's the sort of average time span, or if there is one?
It really depends. It really depends on the building and the type of measures they're trying to implement. Also, yeah, it depends how many people there are involved, because all the decisions need to be made. So it really varies.
That's fair. Okay, so actually, here's a question that I would like you to answer. What are the what are the things in terms of decision making that what can a project come with decision making wise that makes the project go better, smoother, faster?
Well, certain type of measures that go faster sometimes are like the low-hanging fruits or the free measures, like in-unit upgrades, lighting upgrades. They tend to people tend to respond pretty quickly to it, so those tend to move faster. Any like lighting upgrades that are easier to implement, those tend to be probably the first ones that the building will start implementing.
Okay, and then I imagine just good decision-making processes on the building side will make things go faster as well.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Also, keeping everybody in the building, aware of all this changes, and just kind of putting that culture of we're going to like implement all this different measures that would help the building just perform better in general, and will make their the occupancy comfort is also like something important in it. So I think that always affects
That's a great.
how the building reacts to these. It's a lot of different factors that are involved, but considering for like starting with the smaller low-hanging fruit measures and notifying everybody in the building, that's always helpful to start with.
That's great. Thank you. And Derek, again, I don't know if that's a fair question, but I'm gonna ask you too. Is there an average time for, say, let's just say a 100-unit building in the comprehensive, program? So if there's a lot of work going on, like how long does that take?
Yeah, I will say comprehensive is one of the longest timelines, and each different program pathway and measure has their own like expected timeline and or allowed timeline. So in terms of comprehensive, you could actually work on the project for a time over 2 years. So maybe that one isn't the type of project that most people are going with, but
Tell us about the
no,
other
good,
one.
yeah, good to ask. But let's say for something like a roof installation, again, that because you're gonna have to have people do the installations also outside, and so it's weather permitting, things like that. But you can imagine that with the right contractor, you can see something about like 60-90 days between the whole process. And again, some measures are going to be really, really quick, such as a boiler clean and tune. You can clean a boiler and tune it pretty quickly, and so with the right contractor, you can move through the stages very fast. But then something like electrification, those projects end up taking likely the better part of a year, so like 6 to 9 months for electrification heat pump installation. But yeah, in terms of what might help move the process along, definitely everyone being on board with all the decision makers kind of signing off, getting through the paperwork, I would say. So one of the big things about kind of walking through the process, working with Wildan, is for certain things we might need a customer signature, or we might be sending out something to the contractor, or we might have to schedule that pre-inspection or that post-inspection. So kind of having everyone, like Lettuce mentioned, kind of everyone knowing what's happening, right? Because the inspections will need to work with a super at the building, right? Or at least a property staff member. So if we get their information and we can get on site within a few days, then that might make the whole process a little bit faster versus, let's say, it might take a lot of time booking with a certain person over 2 to 3 weeks to get on site.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to answer ask you some of these questions to answer as part of the recording, because anyone watching this later, as part of the recording won't see these questions. Let's see. So some of these are going to be quick. So if someone's considering a roof replacement, how would they apply for an installation incentive? And then a follow-up question was, is there funding for electrical feasibility studies for electrification? I guess those are two different questions.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, first step is just reaching out. We get you the right paperwork for the application, and then we one thing I didn't mention as part of the presentation, but might be useful now. Let's say you have no idea who to work with for the contractor side. Con Edison keeps a curated list, or not curated, but essentially everyone who's active within our program gets added into a list online. And so that list of participating contractors, you can kind of filter between, their expertise is insulation or energy management systems or lighting. And so we could also provide that. So, a lot of my answers will likely be, you can reach out to the email provided. So conedmultifamily@willdan.com, and we can kind of get you started in the right direction. And one other thing I'll mention is, Rebecca Byros is answering a lot of questions. We have, multiple outreach coordinators whose job is to essentially interface and start folks on the right track for, getting into the program. So if you have questions, always feel free to reach out to that email address, and then essentially you'll get picked up by one of our coordinators and start answering the questions from there.
I know that you guys work closely with the accelerator. Is there a difference from the building's perspective if a building calls the accelerator first, or calls Con Ed, or reaches out to the Con Ed email first?
I think the way that I see it is, let's say you're really understanding what you want to do for your next step, like in the sense of like the roof replacement and insulation, then going to us would be the quicker route, right? But in the terms of like, you really know you need to save energy and you're having a hard time, like, what exactly do? I haven't been in my boiler room, for a long time. I don't know if the pipes are covered. How do I even start thinking about these things? Then the accelerator is a great resource to essentially connect all the dots and say, you qualify for this, this, and this, and also the Con Ed incentives.
Okay. That is a great answer. Thank you. And I threw that curveball at you, so I'm going to ask you this now separately. Is there any funding available for electric feasibility studies for electrification?
Yeah, unfortunately, currently, no. We do understand that this is sometimes a barrier to entry to start electrification projects. But there is, ample resources and incentives available for the actual installation.
Okay. Thank you for that. So in the primer, I mentioned where Con Ed gets the money for all these incentives, but we didn't say where the accelerator is funded. So Trevor Taub asked, we say that New York City Accelerator services are free, but where do they get their funding from? So Gladys, I'll let you take that one.
We're a program sponsored by the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. Also, just to add from the previous question, sorry, there are other incentive programs that would fund energy audits, so that are geared toward electrification. Just adding that as well.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, some people think, and people are offering answers to some people's questions, which is lovely. It's so nice. Someone asked specifically if buildings with cogen plants, if they would go through the same process as other buildings, and would that amount with the credits? Well, the question is, would that amount for credits to accruing points? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I can jump in. Cogeneration is interesting. It really depends on the specifications of the equipment. So, I mean, feel free to reach out. A lot of times when there are more complex pieces of equipment, we can kind of talk through and figure out if it would qualify for the incentive, but also anything like a cogeneration plant would have to go through the custom process, which is a little bit more complex, little bit longer. And so, yeah, just keep that in mind. Realistically, you can imagine if you're going to help Con Edison save energy in the long run, it will likely qualify for incentive. If you're actually, in a situation where you've got like national grid gas and you want to start generating your own electricity on site with that national grid gas, then that won't necessarily qualify for incentive. So cogeneration is kind of complex to answer.
It is. Okay, how about we talk about fuel switching?
Yeah. So fuel switching does qualify. Again, it'll go through our custom pathway, sorry. But essentially, if you're looking to go from oil to gas, that's one of the big conversions that we see. And yeah, definitely qualifies under custom pathway.
So, okay, the custom pathway. And then there's another question about incentives for the introduction of electric chillers from a gas-fired absorption chiller. So
Yep.
that's fuel switching also, right?
Yeah.
So Gladys, I think you mentioned earlier about small buildings. There's a question here. Are there incentive programs that cater specifically to small, affordable family buildings with fewer than 5 dwelling units?
Yeah, so if you reach out to us, our program coordinator will connect you to the contact that it's kind of like New York City Accelerator, but provides help for smaller buildings. So they would connect you directly with those programs to help you identify any incentives available for that.
So Derek, would a building that small that has 5 units still qualify under the multifamily program?
As long as it's 5 or more, yeah. And we can, verify that we have that many units, because one of the things just in general is, as part of the process, we'll do the just like verification of how many units are at the property. Most of the properties we work with are not generally at the cusp of qualifying for multifamily or residential. One thing I will say, and it didn't make it to the slides because it is just was announced yesterday, and so didn't quite make it to the slides, but Con Edison is actively doing research on how to better provide incentives to my tagline being smaller and older buildings. So pre-war buildings, anything built before 1940, and then small buildings, so between 5 and 50 units. They've just launched a program offering called the Gas Fast Track. And the whole idea being that a lot of small buildings end up not going through the program because, sometimes it's hard to start the process. So I would say reach out to Accelerator, reach out to us. We'll definitely like to start working with everyone here. But also, we want to make it easier to go through the process. So we're exempting some of the inspections and kind of making it a little bit of a streamlined process so that smaller buildings don't feel as overwhelmed with the installation. So if you have a building that's between 5 and 50 units, you want to save on your gas bill and install energy efficiency equipment, feel free to reach out and ask about our Fast Track program.
Great, thank you. Are there incentives for installing building automation systems, BAS systems for the building?
Yep. Yeah. So generally, there's some differences between, what qualifies as a BMS versus an EMS, but we can move that over under the custom pathway as well.
Okay, does it matter if the building is a co-op or a condo for any of these things, for the incentives?
No, it really just has more to do whether or not it's a market rate or affordable, and then unit size or unit count rather.
Okay, great. There's a question about pace. that I'm looking for here. Oh, for the PACE financing program, are all types of carbon efficiency programs such as oil to natural gas, boiler heater conversions, do they qualify, or just electrification type conversions?
So PACE is very focused on if you're planning to implement a lot of like capital projects, it's not to implement just a few projects. And working with a financing specialist, he'll help you identify which projects would make you eligible for PACE, because sometimes the projects might not have enough like savings. So he will definitely help and provide that guidance just to make sure that, okay, these are the projects that you need to add to qualify for the PACE loan.
Thanks.
But there's also additional loans available if you want to implement lesser like projects, like smaller type of projects.
Right. Now, some of the stuff we covered a lot in these slides. So some of these are a little repetitive, but I think we should go for it anyway. So my building is in the process of upgrading 2 new elevators. Is there an incentive for that, and who do we contact?
Yeah, so that should qualify under elevator modernization. And then, sorry, was the question contact or contract?
Who to contact about that?
Yep, you could just send to that Con Ed multifamily at wildan.com, and we can start discussing the project more.
Okay. All right, and then this question, you sort of answered it, but I think I'm not clear on it either, so I'm gonna ask it. In the case study, does Con Ed actually pay the contractor and the balance comes from the customer? Or are the incentives, or are the different incentives structured differently? Or is that what you described, how they generally all go?
Yeah, so that's a good clarification. Essentially, we assign a payee for the project. So the payee could be either the customer or the contractor. And again, it really depends on whether the customer came in and said, you know, hey, Wildan, we want to do this work, we just don't know who to work with, and they ask for a contractor that isn't really working with the program as much, then they could qualify as the payee. But then other situations where the contractor is bringing to the table a lot of buildings that maybe they generated their own sales, they might request, and the customer would be okay with it, that they are the payee. So they'll get that incentive directly. So it's really a conversation at the end of the day between the customer and the contractor who will be getting the money, right?
So it can be flexible. There's a,
Yep.
oh, I didn't realize that. That's great. I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but there's a question that we got from yesterday. If these incentives apply to new construction as well as existing buildings, or just to existing.
Yeah, so the way that these incentives are structured, it's for existing buildings. There briefly was some incentives for new construction on electrification, but right now all the programs focus on existing buildings.
Okay. The other questions remaining are mostly about specific buildings. I would imagine that the answer is right to that email address. And we're only addressing questions related to multifamily buildings and to, to these incentives programs. So we have reached the end of our questions, and this was everything I wanted it to be. So thank you so much to Derek. Thank you to Gladys. Thank you, Michaela, for participating earlier. We really appreciate it. You must have by now everybody's contact information. We have said it a bunch of times. It's going to be on our on the webpage. But please reach out if you have any other questions at all. We hope to have this up in a day or two, and please, share it with your colleagues, share it with your fellow board members, because the Accelerator and Con Ed are really, you can see how much the information that they're providing, they want it to be clear. They want you to be able to take advantage of all of these. So thank you very much, and we'll email everyone with the recording when it's ready, and have a great night.